Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We're counting down to budget day in India tomorrow. The economy has so far beaten expectations in an otherwise challenging global environment. But the road ahead could be tough. Tonight, we bring you two stories. One about America's $34 trillion debt bomb that threatens the whole world. How is the world's richest country also the biggest debt holder? And two, the Red Sea crisis that is hurting India. Exports have been hit and there seems to be no resolution in sight. Meanwhile, Israel is taking the war to another level. Israeli commandos, disguised as medical workers, raided a hospital in the West Bank and shot dead sleeping targets. This is a war crime, but the West is silent. On the other side of the world, China has sent some 200 ships to threaten the Philippines. In Europe, Serbia is preparing for war and reintroducing mandatory military service. In the Maldives, a breakdown of law and order after the parliament ruckus, a prosecutor has been attacked. In Ukraine, a power struggle between the president and the army chief. In Malaysia, a new king has taken oath as part of their unique rotating monarchy. And a court has rejected Elon Musk's pay package, $56 billion a year. A judge said it's an unfathomable sum, which is the thing with most CEO salaries. Why are they sky high and how much is too much? Also, Scotland is looking for a missing monkey using drones. It's a happening world. The headlines first. Myanmar junta extends the state of emergency by 6 months. This once again delays the election which the military had promised to hold. In February 2021, the junta ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's government and declared emergency, which has been extended multiple times since then. European Union floats a compromise formula on Ukraine to Hungary. Budapest has been offered an annual debate on aid to Kiev, but no yearly veto. This comes ahead of a make-or-break summit in Brussels. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has been blocking 50 billion euros in aid to Ukraine. Orban is Russia's closest ally in the EU. The United Nations says the war in Sudan has displaced nearly 8 million people. Last April, the conflict between the army chief and his former deputy erupted. Since then, numerous ceasefires have been broken and diplomatic efforts to end this violence have failed so far. A Thai court orders ending the reform campaign over the Royal Insult Law. The court called it unlawful. The campaign was launched by the progressive Move Forward party. The law protects the king from insult. Those who break it face up to 15 years in jail per offence. New dog rules in England and Wales from tomorrow. It will be illegal to own American XL bully dogs without a certificate, and they must be muzzled in public always. The ban follows a series of attacks involving the XL bullies. And newly minted Australian Open champion Rohan Bopanna speaks to Firstpost, talks about being the oldest player to win a Grand Slam. It's a Firstpost exclusive.
I wasn't enjoying myself on the court. I was trying to force to get the win. Speaking to both my wife Supriya and my coach Scott, thankfully, they were not going to let me quit when I was down.
What is the world's biggest concern right now? Conflicts, arguably. The wars in Ukraine and West Asia, they're causing a lot of instability. But what if I told you that far from these conflict zones, there's a new crisis emerging? A $34 trillion debt bomb growing bigger by the day and causing global anxiety. This debt bomb belongs to the United States of America, the richest country in the world, also the biggest debt holder in the world. And when it explodes, this bomb will cause global devastation. The warning comes from the boss of America's biggest bank. His name is Jamie Dimon. He's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase. He says US debt endangers global security. And this debt is humongous. As of today, US borrowing stands at 120% of its GDP. By 2035, this number is set to hit 130% of America's GDP. That is the level of their debt. And this high level of debt is quite dangerous. Let me quote from what Dimon has said. If you look at that 100% debt to GDP by 2035, I think it's going to be 130%, and it's a hockey stick. That hockey stick does not start yet, but when it starts, markets around the world, there will be a rebellion. What is this hockey stick he's talking about? It's a scenario where high borrowing leads to higher costs, charges to service this debt. And how does it pose a global threat? Again, let me quote. This is about the security of the world. We need a stronger military. We need a stronger America. We need it now. So I put this as a risky thing for all of us. This is risky both for America and its allies and the rest of the world. Many of these allies have bought debt issued by the US government. I'm talking about government bonds. And their exposure is quite high, around $7.6 trillion. That's how much countries around the world have spent. They have bought this debt, $7.6 trillion. And the most vulnerable among them are American allies. I have a list, and topping this list is Japan. Japan owns over $1 trillion of US government debt. The United Kingdom, around $716 billion. Luxembourg, $371 billion. And Canada, $321 billion. And why have so many countries invested in US government debt? Because they thought it's a solid investment. As Joe Biden himself says, we are able to borrow because we always pay our debt. But is that really a guarantee? What happens when the loans keep piling up and the US is unable to catch up? What happens if the United States defaults? All of these countries will lose money, their economies will be exposed. Some of them are military allies of the US. Canada and the UK, for instance, they're members of NATO. Japan is central to US defense strategy in the East. A default by America will leave all of them weaker, and this is the risk that the JP Morgan chief is referring to. The other big risk, of course, is to the US itself. Such high levels of debt will hurt American defenses. Untamed debt could lead to a budget squeeze. The United States is the world's biggest defense spender. In 2022, it spent over $800 billion on defense. In contrast, the national debt surpassed 100% of the country's GDP, which brings us to the obvious question, how did the US end up with so much debt in the first place? Ironically, one key reason is America's many conflicts. The post-9/11 wars. The United States has spent or sanctioned around $8 trillion on its wars, meaning they've spent $8 trillion on wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and on strengthening America's global security presence. $8 trillion. These wars were financed almost entirely through debt. Since 2001, these loans have ballooned and the interest keeps piling up. I have some estimates from 2020. Experts say the US borrowed some $2 trillion for its global war on terror. By 2030, interest on these loans would spike to $2 trillion. So the US will have to pay $2 trillion in principal and another $2 trillion in interest. So $4 trillion in all. And what happens if this interest keeps piling on, if they don't pay? By 2050, the interest payment alone would be worth some $6.5 trillion. So America's many wars are burning a hole in the taxpayer's pocket. And yet they haven't tightened their belt. This debt is now the biggest vulnerability of the US, not an external enemy, but its own growing pile of debt. And it should worry the world. But the world is busy with a crisis at hand in the Red Sea, where missile attacks continue unabated. The latest came today, in fact. The Houthis fired several missiles. They targeted US ships. The Americans managed to fend off the strikes, but the big picture does not look good. These attacks are bleeding economies, among them India. Indian exports are getting delayed. Shipments are being held up and traders are taking losses. Tonight, we'll focus on how this crisis is directly hurting India. You see, India is heavily reliant on the Red Sea. This trade route is used to reach 4 regions: Europe, North America, North Africa, and West Asia. Goods worth billions of dollars are supplied through this route. Exports from India through the Red Sea are valued at 18 trillion rupees. Exports 18 trillion rupees, that's around 217 billion US dollars. And then there are imports. India imports from these regions too. The imports are worth 17 trillion rupees, that's 205 billion US dollars. Now, all of this trade has been hit, mostly because of the delays. The time taken to move the goods from one place to another has increased substantially. Shipments are delayed by almost a month, anywhere between 21 to 28 days. That's the delay. And the reasons remain the same. Ships are avoiding the Red Sea route. Instead of going via the Suez Canal, they're being redirected to the southern tip of Africa, going around the Cape of Good Hope, which adds another 6,500 kilometers to the journey, 6,500 kilometers, and at least 2 extra weeks of sailing time. Some ships have been held back as well. In fact, we have a breakup. When the Red Sea crisis began, 25% of India's outbound shipments were held back. Outbound shipments are exports sent directly through warehouses. These goods have not left India at all. And that's because exporters have not been able to find ships to take them. And those who could find ships had to take the longer route. About 95% of cargo ships from India have taken this Africa route, the longer route. And they'll continue to do so in the foreseeable future because there is no resolution in sight. India is doing its bit to mitigate the crisis. The Indian Navy is on the job. They've been manning the waters in and around the Red Sea. They've been securing vital routes. They've been rescuing sailors under threat. In the Indian Ocean alone, the Navy has conducted at least 9 operations in recent days. They've rescued commercial ships. But despite India's strong presence and defenses, the shipments have not stabilized. Experts are projecting losses in the last financial year. In fact, India exported goods worth $451 billion overall in the last year, $451 billion, out of which exports worth more than $30 billion could be impacted because of the Red Sea crisis. That's almost 7% of India's exports. And this is just an estimate. We are waiting for the latest trade numbers from the government. They will show the true extent of the damage. What is clear is the fact that a prolonged disruption will hurt India and its economic growth. That's also the conclusion of ratings agency Fitch. They have raised a red flag. Let me quote from the Fitch report. This is what it says. If Red Sea disruptions were to persist, the resulting downward revisions to our India forecast will probably be significant and would dent our 4% growth forecast for Asia in 2024. So they will have to revise the growth forecasts downwards. And this is not just for India. Fitch says countries like Bangladesh are vulnerable too. In fact, the entire region is at risk. But being the bigger economy, India is likely to suffer a more significant impact. The Red Sea crisis is not just a security challenge for New Delhi. It will also test the resilience of the Indian economy. Tomorrow, India's finance minister will present an interim budget. We're waiting to see if there is any measure or there are any recommendations to address this crisis. And the Red Sea crisis was triggered by the Israel-Hamas war. That war is still on. More than 26,000 civilians have been killed. Almost 10,000 of them were children. Israel has been waging war for almost 4 months, a war instigated by Hamas. They carried out a brutal terror attack on the 7th of October last year, so Israel struck back with full force, and the world supported it. After all, the country has every right to defend itself. But does it have the right to inflict terror of its own? 4 months is a long time, and it seems Israel has transitioned from being a defender of its security to a dispenser of horror. Yesterday, it crossed another line. Israel conducted a raid inside a hospital. It was undertaken by about a dozen commandos from the Shin Bet Security Service and Border Police. These Israeli officers entered the hospital dressed as civilians. They secured and blocked the routes in and out of the place and proceeded to move civilians out of their way. Security camera footage from the raid has been leaked. You can see the Israelis dressed as medical workers and women. They even carried wheelchairs and bassinets as props. The Israelis then went to their targets, 3 Palestinian men. All 3 of them were killed.
They killed the 3 youth, Basil and Mohammed Al-Ghazavi and Mohammed Al-Jamna, in their room while they were sleeping on their beds in the room. They killed them in cold blood with direct gunshots to the head.
He said direct gunshots to the head, allegedly from silenced pistols. The aftermath seems to confirm this story. Pillows with bullet holes, fold-out chairs covered in blood. The targets did seem to be sleeping when the attack took place. And this is where things start getting murky, because what happened here sounds like an assassination. Not a raid to capture, but to kill. It gets worse when you hear the details. The raid did not take place in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. It was in the West Bank. In the Ibn Sina hospital in Jenin, which is technically Palestinian territory but under Israeli control. So no Hamas tunnels under this hospital. This is where Israel conducted the strikes. Now let's look at the targets. The prime target was Mohammed Jalamna. He was a member of Hamas, and Hamas has confirmed this. Israel says he was planning an attack inspired by October 7th. He also apparently had a pistol with him, which Israel says they have recovered. But the hospital staff denies that he had a weapon. And they say the target was shot while he was sleeping. So is Israel suggesting that the commandos could not disarm and arrest a sleeping man? Then there are 2 other targets. The brothers, Basil and Mohammed Al-Ghazavi. They were also members of a militant group, the Palestine Islamic Jihad. Again, the group has confirmed this. Basil had apparently been in the hospital for months undergoing treatment for a shrapnel injury, an injury that had left him partially paralyzed. His brother was there watching over him that night. Did they really have to shoot dead this half-paralyzed man? It was clearly a planned assassination, and that too at a hospital, which is a war crime. There is no other way to put it. The International Committee of the Red Cross seems to agree. They put this up today, saying that hospitals are off limits. And despite all of this, Israel's Western allies have not batted an eye. Usually, they're the first to denounce war crimes unless they are the ones committing them, of course.
Again, not able to offer an assessment without knowing all these facts. I said some of the facts that have been presented by Israel are that one of them was carrying a gun and that they were planning to carry out or to launch terrorist operations. So you would have to look at all of those facts to make a specific assessment about this operation. But in general, we do want to see hospitals protected. It is important that no civilians were harmed in this operation.
Israel said the man had a gun, he posed a threat, so they killed him. The US had once said there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, so they attacked. What happens when countries start taking out targets unlawfully and without proof? What happens when the so-called good guys are caught lying? Who pays the price? Who watches the watchers? What is the rest of the West doing? And we understand that this is war. There will be questionable acts. But governments cannot behave like terror groups. Following the rule of law is what distinguishes the two. Israel has every right to defend itself, but all rights come with riders and lines that must not be crossed. And we are not done with conflicts. Next on our list is the South China Sea, where Beijing remains the unapologetic bully, raising tensions, reigniting old flashpoints and challenging regional players. This week, their target was the Philippines. China has been trying to threaten them with ships, not 1 or 2, but 200 of them. China has dispatched 200 ships to make a point to challenge Manila's control on a disputed shoal. Beijing has sent vessels from its Coast Guard and militia boats. They're stationed here near the second Thomas Shoal. This is a submerged reef inside the Spratly Island. In 1999, Manila took control of the shoal. And there's an interesting backstory here. In the 1990s, China took over the Mischief Reef. The reef was claimed by Manila, but Chinese forces ended up occupying it. Eventually, it was turned into a militarized island. The Philippines was concerned, their military was concerned. They had to check China's advances. And for this, they needed some sort of permanent presence in the region. So they narrowed down on the second Thomas Shoal. They parked a rusty warship here. It's called the Sierra Madre. Since 1999, this warship has been there, and Manila has been using it as a military base. They keep a detachment of Marines here. The Marines watch the movement of Chinese vessels and their activities. In recent months, China has targeted this Marine detachment. Every now and then, these soldiers need supplies, stuff like food and other amenities for survival. So Manila frequently sends ships to replenish these supplies. In recent months, China has tried to block these vessels to stop them from reaching the Sierra Madre. And this has led to many dangerous encounters. Chinese ships have fired water cannons on resupply vessels. China's Coast Guard has even rammed into them on multiple occasions. Last year, we saw dozens of such confrontations. Manila refused to engage with Beijing militarily, but vowed to push back.
The recent incidents involving no less than our AFP Chief of Staff is worrisome. Yes, but it is a proud demonstration of Filipino courage against coercion and our firm resolve to protect, preserve, and uphold our territorial integrity.
China refuses to back down, though. It has sent more ships to this area, including militia boats. China says they're there for fishing. But the real purpose is not lost on the world. Gunboat diplomacy is China's old tactic. They fund militia boats, they equip them with machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades and water cannons, and use them to intimidate neighbors. 200 such vessels are now in the vicinity of the second Thomas Shoal. Their presence is supposed to send a message to Manila to force a withdrawal. Last week, Beijing also issued a warning.
The current difficulties in China-Philippines relations are rooted in the fact that the Philippine side has betrayed trust and justice, colluded with external powers, and continued to infringe on and provoke in the South China Sea to the detriment of China's legitimate rights and interests. We call on the Philippines to respect history, recognize reality, and refrain from following the wrong path. China is willing to resolve its differences with the Philippines through bilateral dialogue and consultation. But if the Philippine side is bent on having its own way, China will resolutely counteract it.
And what is Manila's response? It wants to dial down tensions, of course. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is taking a cautious approach. He has called for a dialogue with China. At the same time, he has vowed to protect his nation's sovereignty. So withdrawal from the second Thomas Shoal is unlikely. Marcos Jr. is also roping in allies. This week, he visited Vietnam. He signed a security pact with Hanoi. And we told you about this yesterday. The pact is aimed at containing China. But you see, Beijing is a big adversary. It is better funded and better armed. And it's pushing back with more ships and more aggression. No country, however small, will compromise with its sovereignty. So there's only one result in sight: an intensifying conflict in the South China Sea. Now let's turn our attention to Europe, to the Balkan region. The Balkans have been a hotbed for ethnic tensions for years, and they seem to be bubbling up again. Two major events are taking place. Serbia is planning to reintroduce mandatory military service, and Kosovo is planning to ban the Serbian currency, the Serbian dinar. There have also been political rumblings from Serbs in Bosnia. If you know about the bloody breakup of Yugoslavia, you know that this has the potential to escalate, and another war is the last thing that Europe needs. Our next report looks at the developments.
Serbia is a country located in the Balkans. It is home to about 6.5 million people. At one point, it was the center of Yugoslavia, a socialist country that broke up into 6 successor states in the 1990s. That breakup was a bloody one, leaving tens of thousands dead. The Yugoslav wars were the worst European conflict since World War II, and the wounds from that time still haven't healed completely. Which is why it is alarming when Serbia says it is planning to boost its army. Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić hinted at this yesterday. During a military hardware inspection, He said Serbia may bring back mandatory military service. This was abolished on the 1st of January 2011. But now Vučić wants to bring it back, based on advice from Serbia's military and defense ministry. He says there are no concrete plans yet. The Serbian parliament will vote on a proposal. They will decide when mandatory military service starts again and how long it lasts. Before 2011, the service would last for 6 months. Vučić now says it could be between 3 to 4 months. He also justified the move, saying, "Today, if you don't have a strong army, you don't have a country." He also said that Serbia isn't threatening anyone. But that may not be accurate, considering who was by his side. This man.
We are integrating. We are mentally integrated into Serbia. Of course, we are part of Bosnia now, but that's because we have to be. Bosnia-Herzegovina is not something we want.
That is Milorad Dodik. He's the president of the Republic of Srpska, an autonomous Serb-majority region within Bosnia. This region fought to remain with Serbia during the Bosnian War, but the final peace treaty gave it to Bosnia in 1995. Now Dodik has been acting up. He accompanied Vučić during the military inspection yesterday. Earlier this month, on January 9th, he celebrated a controversial Bosnian Serb National Day, despite being warned not to do so by Bosnia and the US. Vučić's talk of a military build-up is bound to fan the flames, as is another event, in Kosovo. Kosovo is an autonomous region in Serbia. It declared independence from Serbia in 2008. Some countries have accepted this, many like India have not. But Kosovo is governed independently, and it has been trying to separate itself from Serbia. Tomorrow may see another step in that direction. Kosovo plans to stop accepting the Serbian dinar as legal tender. It'll only use the euro from tomorrow. This will negatively impact the ethnic Serbs living in Kosovo, many of whom get salaries and aid from Serbia. Serbia's Vučić held an emergency meeting about this last night. The Balkans are turning into a tinderbox again, and that's the last thing the region needs.
Now let's turn to the Maldives, where law and order seem to be falling apart. On Sunday, there was a brawl in parliament. Today, it was much worse. The Maldivian Prosecutor General was attacked in broad daylight. His name is Hossein Shamim. He was appointed as Prosecutor General by the previous government, the pro-India government, led by former President Ibrahim Mohammed Soli. Soli had appointed Shamim in 2019, and he has been serving since. This morning, Shamim was attacked by two bike-borne assailants. Shamim had reportedly just dropped his child off at school and he was on his way to work. He was at a distance from his security detail. That's when the assailants struck. They hit Shamim with a hammer, fracturing his left hand as he tried to protect his head. Initial reports had described it as a stabbing, but the Maldivian police have said he was not attacked with a sharp object. The attackers fled the scene. No arrests have been made yet. Shamim was taken to a hospital after the attack and he seems to be doing fine now. He put up a post on Facebook promising to return to running, cycling and swimming soon. The Maldivian prosecutor got lucky. It could have been far worse. And the incident highlights the chaos in the Maldives. It's a country of barely 500,000 people, and attacks on high-ranking officials are taking place in broad daylight. It does not speak highly of security under the current regime, led by the pro-China president, Mohammad Muizzu. But that situation may change soon. We told you on Monday about how Muizzu is in trouble. The opposition wants to impeach the president and they have the numbers. Two parties are working towards this. Former President Soli's Maldivian Democratic Party, or MDP, and a party called the Democrats. Together they have 56 MPs. But they might get even more support. The MDP says some members of Muizzu's own party want him out, and that they may work with the opposition to oust the president. If true, it seems Muizzu has alienated everyone with his rhetoric, even some of his own allies, and definitely the neutrals. The leader of the Maldives' Jumhuri, or Republican Party, has spoken out. His name is Qasim Ibrahim. He said, and I'm quoting, "I call on President Muizzu to formally apologize to the Indian government and Prime Minister Modi regarding his remarks after the China trip. And these are the remarks that he's talking about.
We may be small, but that doesn't give you the license to bully us. Shukriya.
He accused India of bullying the Maldives and insulted the long friendship between the two nations. India and the Maldives have worked together for decades, built a lasting partnership. But Muizu wants to undo all of that. He said this after he got back from China. He broke tradition by going to Beijing before visiting New Delhi. And upon landing, he fired his first salvo. It may be good for his politics, but it has worried the politicians who care for the Maldives. The statement by Ibrahim shows that the neutrals are worried. They don't want to swap New Delhi for Beijing. They favor a more nuanced approach, which is why they are encouraging Muizu to apologize and mend ties with Male's closest partner. But will the president listen? Will he undo the damage that he has done, or is impeachment the only way out for the Maldives? We'll be tracking this story for you. For the moment, let's turn to Ukraine and the war that their military is fighting, not the one against Russia, but domestically. A war with President Zelensky. This is what reports say. The Ukrainian president is losing trust in the army's leadership. He wants the army chief to step down. That's General Valery Zaluzhny, the army chief of Ukraine. Zelensky wants him to go, and there's more. A rebellion of sorts, because the general has refused his president's orders. Zaluzhny does not want to part ways with the army. So is this a power struggle in the making? The presidential office was quick to dismiss these reports, but as they say, there's no smoke without fire. Looks like all is not well between Zelensky and the army. And this has peaked with the weapons procurement scam. It happened recently. $400 million was stolen, money that was meant for purchasing mortar shells. The money was spent, but the shells never came. And $400 million went into offshore accounts somewhere in the Balkans. When the scam came to light, Ukraine's Secret Service arrested 5 people, but the bigger damage was done. It showed Zelensky in poor light and made international donors think twice, or will make them think twice, before shelling out aid. Whichever way you look at it, it's bad news for Ukraine. Their war with Russia will complete 2 years in less than a month, and they're far from winning it. In fact, Kiev's counteroffensive has failed. Yes, some gains were made, but the objective is far from being achieved. Russian troops still occupy large areas in Ukraine, and Zelensky now wants answers from his generals.
I have working relations with Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Army, Zaluzhny. He has to answer for results on the battlefield as Commander-in-Chief, together with the General Staff. There are many questions.
Disagreements between Zelensky and the army chief are growing. There was another big spat recently. It happened in December after Zelensky fired the generals who headed recruitment centers. He called it a sweeping move to combat corruption. To make matters worse, Zelensky's cabinet passed a conscription bill. It lowered the age limit of mobilization among men from 27 to 25 years. The media-shy army chief finally broke his silence. First, he criticized Zelensky for firing seasoned generals. Then he demanded that the old draft system be brought back. The army chief even spoke about the counteroffensive that he oversaw. He defended the operation that President Zelensky has questioned.
We had rather ambitious goals in 2023. I was not disappointed by the level of foreign assistance in 2023. Of course, it was not the full amount requested, but it allowed us to conduct confident military operations.
There are more instances of political rivalry. Zelensky has warned the army chief against entering politics. This was his message to General Zaluzhny and all other commanders, that there is an understanding of hierarchy. And this statement betrays a lot. For the president to have to spell it out and say publicly that hierarchy must be respected, in which Zelensky himself sits at the top. Why did he feel the need to say it? One reason could be this. The army chief is growing in popularity. A survey from December puts that into perspective. Zelensky's popularity is at 47%. The army chief is at 30%. The third best candidate is at just 5%. And the same survey also suggested that if both leaders, Zelensky and the army chief, if both these leaders were to run for president, Zelensky would secure just a 2% margin over the army chief. Those numbers are concerning if you are the Ukrainian president. Thankfully for him, the presidential polls right now are only theoretical. But the rift in Kiev's leadership looks very real, and cracks in Ukraine's unity will only play into Russia's hands. Our next story comes from Malaysia. The Southeast Asian nation has sworn in a new monarch, Sultan Ibrahim Sultan Iskandar. He is the new king, but only for 5 years, because Malaysia has a unique system, a rotating monarchy, the only one in the world. They keep changing kings because they have 9 royal families, so everyone should get a chance. And while the king largely remains a ceremonial figure, this new one, Sultan Iskandar, wants to do things differently. He's been outspoken about politics. Malaysia has witnessed political instability in recent years. The new Sultan says he is on the side of the people, not politicians. A bit rich coming from a royal who also happens to be worth over $5 billion. He owns companies that deal in palm oil and real estate. He loves his luxury cars and super bikes. So will the people of Malaysia be able to connect with their new king? Here's our report.
The Southeast Asian nation of Malaysia has a new king. Sultan Ibrahim Sultan Iskandar. The 64-year-old king hails from the southern state called Johor. He will be Malaysia's king for the next 5 years. Now, this might sound strange to many, a king ruling for a fixed term just like elected politicians around the world. But Malaysia has a unique system, that of a rotating monarchy, the only one in the world. The idea was conceptualized by the 9 royal families of Malaysia after the country gained independence from colonial rule. So, every 5 years, heads of these royal families take turns in assuming the throne. And a new king is sworn in for a fixed period, just like Sultan Iskandar.
Therefore, with this oath, we truthfully and honestly swear that we will abide by executing the governing of Malaysia in fairness, by following the laws and governance that has been legitimized and publicized from this moment on. We also swear truthfully and honestly that we will always keep the religion of Islam above the governance that is fair and safe within this nation.
Monarchy in Malaysia is largely ceremonial. The royal families hold a secret vote to select the next king. But once elected, the king becomes the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The king also appoints the prime minister after the national elections. But this power hasn't been utilized in recent years. That's because Malaysia's political landscape has been in turmoil. The country has seen 4 different prime ministers since 2020 as the governments keep losing majority. Now the new king wants to do things differently. Sultan Iskandar says that he's on the side of the people and not the politicians. He says he will call out the government if they don't perform their duties. Sultan Iskandar also has a larger-than-life personality. The question is, will the people be able to connect with him? Ibrahim Sultan Iskandar belongs to one of the wealthiest families in Malaysia. The new king is worth over $5 billion. He owns multiple companies that do business in palm oil, real estate and mining. He also has stakes in many firms in China and Singapore. His family even has its own private army, not to mention a fleet of private jets. But the king is most famous for his automobile collection. He has 300 luxury cars and loves to ride his superbikes. The Sultan has repeatedly defended his lavish lifestyle as well as his businesses. He says that he has to earn a living just like ordinary Malaysians. But it's not all glitz and glamour. Interestingly, Sultan Iskandar has also written several books for children. So, as he gets ready to take charge of Malaysia, the new king has his task cut out, to win the people over, but also ensure the future of the monarchy.
There is a business philosophy. It says that the best financial bargain is a CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, the highest ranking employee within any organization usually. Simply put, the philosophy means this: you cannot overpay a good CEO and you cannot underpay a bad one. But who decides this pay? What justifies it? And how much is too much pay? We ask because Elon Musk, he's in the news again, this time over his pay. Musk is the CEO of Tesla Motors. He took the position in 2018. Guess how much he was paid for it? A record-breaking $55.8 billion. I'll repeat that for you. Nearly $56 billion per year. It is jaw-dropping. And if the jaw can drop any further, let me tell our Indian viewers, it is over 46 kharabs in Indian rupees. That's 46 plus 11 zeros. Elon Musk's compensation was the largest corporate pay deal ever. In 2022, the package was 6 times larger than the combined pay of the 200 highest paid executives in 2021. But don't let this dampen the joy of your payday. Just as Tesla agreed to pay Musk $56 billion, a shareholder filed a lawsuit against Musk and Tesla. His name is Richard Tornetta. He claimed that the pay was excessive and he blamed Tesla's board for it. According to Tornetta, the board decided the pay, but they did not act independently. Musk improperly dictated negotiations. The case went to court in Delaware. After 5 years, the judgment is finally here. The judge has tossed out Musk's pay package, calling it, and I'm quoting, an unfathomable sum. So what happens next? Musk may appeal the ruling, or Tesla's board may have to come up with a new proposal for him. Musk is currently the richest person in the world. This could drop him down to number 3. Shocking, I know. This is affecting Tesla too. Hours after the ruling, its shares fell by 3%. But most of all, this ruling is being seen as a warning, not just to Tesla, but to companies everywhere in the world that award their executives exorbitant sums. And stop me if you've heard this one before, but CEOs are unbelievably well compensated. High sky CEO pay is no secret, and it keeps rising further into the stratosphere, sometimes even when CEOs do not even take up positions. Like in September 2022, Lakshman Narasimhan was hired as the new Starbucks CEO. He was set to make about $18 million a year. But even if he did not join by next April, he would still be making $8 million. So what justifies the fat paychecks of these big cats? CEOs are key to success. For starters, they create wealth for the shareholders, which is their primary goal. Top bosses are visionary leaders, or expected to be. Their decisions affect every employee and customer. They have to take big risks, and they must reap big rewards, which is what apparently explains the gulf between a CEO's paycheck and their typical employees. But how vast can this gulf be? Let me show you some numbers. This is the ratio of CEO pay to a typical worker's pay. In the 1960s, it stood at 20 to 1. So if the CEO is making $20, an average worker is making 1. By 2019, this gap rose to 300 to 1. And with every passing year, it gets worse. In America, the average pay gap is 670 to 1. But remember, that's the average. At Walmart, for instance, the pay ratio is 983 to 1. At Coca-Cola, it is 1,621 to 1. At Amazon, it is 6,474 to 1. In 2019, Disney CEO Bob Iger got a pay package of $66 million. It was more than 1,000 times the median pay of Disney employees. This is staggering. But most nations have a similar story. In India, the top paid executives receive annual pay of about $1 million on average. An average worker earns $12,000. In the UK, CEOs make $5 million. For the average worker, it is about $40,000. In South Africa, CEOs earn $800,000. Workers make $1,600. Studies say you'd have to work 5 lifetimes to make what your boss makes in 1 year. And this rarely changes even when crisis strikes. During the first year of the pandemic, CEO pay jumped 19%, even as many businesses ground to a halt. So while it is true that CEOs bring massive value to a company, at some point this pay disparity appears fundamentally unfair. Studies show that it also builds resentment. It can be demoralizing. It can lead to employee backlash, which comes out in ugly ways. Lower paid employees shrug off responsibilities or leave their jobs or go on strikes. Recently, we saw all of this with the Hollywood writers' strike and the Detroit auto workers' protests. Because people make a lot of work decisions based on pay. Not just what they are being paid, but also what others around them are. It affects a lot of people. Plus, does it even help CEOs all that much? These high pay packages. Studies say not really. Increasing CEO pay is not linked to increasing CEO productivity. So a CEO's salary should not be an extreme sport, because it can be just as bad for optics as it is for business. And our last story tonight comes from Scotland, where Kingi Kong is on the loose. Sounds like an intimidating name, but that is no drug lord or murderer. It's a monkey. He escaped from a zoo on the Scottish Highlands 4 days ago, and since then, he has tasted sweet freedom, stolen nuts from nearby bird feeders and given zookeepers a good runabout. The desperate seekers have now set up a monkey hotline, believe it or not, and they've deployed thermal drones. It sounds bizarre, but finding Kong has been no monkey business. Our next report tells you why.
Picture someone escaping from a cage. Troops are chasing after him, but the escapee sees only independence, and he runs towards it. Nothing will work on him. No one can bring him back into the shackles. Not bananas, not whistles, and not even thermal drones. Believe it or not, the escapee in this case is a monkey, a Japanese macaque to be specific, nicknamed Kingi Kong. Now, that nickname exudes some main character energy, and for good reason. The monkey has an anti-hero vibe going for him. He was the resident of a Scottish zoo, the Highland Wildlife Park near Kingi on the Scottish Highlands. But 4 days ago, he escaped from the zoo, apparently due to high tensions with other primates. Maybe Kong was antisocial. Or maybe he was stuck in a real-life monkey version of Mean Girls. Either way, it must not have been a barrel of monkeys, because Kong has been on the run ever since. Initially, Kong was spotted some 300 meters away from the zoo. He was seen picking nuts from neighbors' bird feeders. Ah, the sweet taste of freedom, bird food. Zookeepers hoped the missing macaque would return of his own volition, but that wasn't to be. Kong gave the zookeepers quite a runabout. They relied on basic lures, like whistling at him to get his attention, though that may not have gone too well. Who knows, maybe even monkeys are woke too.
We were hoping that in getting it close enough, it would be able to hear the whistle, and because of all our training, they've got that strong association with the whistle, and it would know that it's feeding time, and so that it would potentially hop back over and join its troop.
Zookeepers tried using food as well. Kong didn't pay any heed, and they can't use an anesthetic dart on him.
See what he does. He's not in the best position for darting. He's under some really thick, heavy cover.
Kong has gone much farther over time. He's moving under dense tree cover. His farthest sighting has been 4 kilometers away. Now the zookeepers have deployed some big guns in the metaphorical sense. They are using thermal drones. Yes, thermal drones, all to track a monkey. The public has been warned to stay safe. There is even a dedicated monkey hotline to track him. The zookeepers, much like Drake, certainly hope that the hotline blings. After all, catching Kong has been no monkey business.
I think it's a good note to wrap on. It's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. A group of men attacked a police officer in New York while he was trying to make an arrest. In South Africa's Cape Town, raging wildfires sent up plumes of smoke. Meanwhile, zoo animals got icy treats as Chile battles a heat wave. And finally, taking you back to 2014 for some midweek motivation. On January 31st, a 102-year-old French cyclist beat his own world record. He cycled nearly 27 kilometers in an hour. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
You can hardly see the helicopter, but there he's going.
Come on.